and welcome back to the BCR Dawson sub. This update will cover work undertaken during February of 2022, again primarily on the sections for Chetwynd Yard and Dawson Creek. One of the tasks remaining to be accomplished for Chetwynd was the addition of a control panel for the new Imperial oil spur. This was waiting on its angled mount, which arrived just after my last video update. I reused the original Lamicoid panel, and I found a spare toggle switch with the lead wires already attached. The new panel was installed next to the CAN 4mm panel, which roughly put it in line with the turnout for the new spur. After installing the angled mount on the fascia and the toggle switch into the control panel, the wires were fed through and back to the waiting servo controller where it was connected. This ended all of the wiring revisions underneath Chetwynd Yard. And with all of the wiring revisions complete, I was able to reinstall the shelf for the LED lighting power supplies. It is worth noting that there are now several servos and controllers just above the shelf, which is what required its removal in the first place. Here we have the new Imperial oil spur, and over on the fascia in front of that turnout we have the new control panel for Imperial oil. The wires from the toggle pass through the fascia and underneath to the servo controller that is on the left there, and that activates the turnout. In the adjacent room, the wall which will accommodate Septimus has been painted the same blue as the layout room. This provides the same background wall color as the layout room. I also completed the design work for Septimus, which will run along the wall for about 11 feet. This is an oblique view of the two proposed benchwork sections. This drawing shows front elevation and overhead plan views. And this drawing shows cross sections at the left end, the center, and the right end. I also constructed a 6-inch long cardboard mock-up to help visualize what the benchwork will look like, and also to test the viewing angle. The new taller backdrop for Chetwynd Yard was glued and clamped in place along its base. It was glued in front of the lower existing backdrop. The new backdrop is 3.5 inches taller, which eliminates the gap between the top of the backdrop and the underside of the upper deck, and it will also assist with photography in Chetwynd Yard. The joints between backdrop sections are filled with strips of plastic molding, which tie the two panels of 1/8 inch masonite together. They will be painted blue to match the backdrop. The joint between the new and old backdrops was filled with drywall mud and sanded for a smooth transition. Several applications were required. While that was drying, I began applying 2 coats of gesso acrylic primer to the backdrop for Chetwynd. This is to provide some texture on which to paint the future backdrop scene. This photograph was taken during final sanding of the backdrop joint, and I then extended the acrylic primer across the completed joint. The left end backdrop for Dawson Creek also received several layers of drywall mud to repair the damage after removing the end backdrop wall. The new backdrop for Chetwynd Yard was then painted blue to match the walls of the layout room and the underside of the upper deck benchwork. For those interested, the color is CC786 Summer Day, which is available from Benjamin Moore. This is the joint between the new and old backdrops after filling, sanding, priming, and painting. The backdrops for Dawson Creek also received 2 coats of blue. This is the left half of the yard, and this is the right half of the yard, which is currently standing on its end. I have finished painting the new backdrop for Chetwynd Yard. It's painted the same color of blue as the layout room and the walls. Here we see the joiner sections, which will go in once the layout sections are bolted together. The candle is to provide some lubrication when they go on, so that if I ever need to remove them again, they will slide out fairly easily. The backdrop has 2 coats of paint on it. And as we move from the left half of the yard to the right half of the yard, we approach the section where the new backdrop joins the old. This section was filled, sanded, primed, and painted, and it's now looking pretty good. So these 2 sections are now ready for permanent installation. We're looking at the bench work for the left half of Dawson Creek after I've painted the backdrop. We did some repairs to the left edge of the backdrop, which you see there, and it is now all painted and ready for hanging. There you can see the 2 backdrop joiners, which will go in once these sections have been hung. And then here we come over to the right half of Dawson Creek, which is currently standing on its end. You can see the backdrops being painted. And also ready for hanging. And so the day finally came for rehanging the first sections of benchwork. After 4 months of repairs and revisions to track and wiring and turnout control, the sections for Chetwynd Yard and Dawson Creek were ready for installation. My friends Michael, Nolan, and John came over to help with us. The 2 lower deck halves of Chetwynd Yard were already sitting in place, so the first step was to bolt them back together. I used carriage bolts, washers, and nuts for this. To aid in leveling the layout sections, a quantity of wedges and shims of various thicknesses was prepared. Where the brackets contact the cross members underneath the benchwork, wedges were driven in. They were then adjusted as needed to level the layout sections, which was checked up on top with a level. When the layout section was level, a shim of the appropriate thickness was inserted to replace the wedge, which was then removed. Screws were then driven through the brackets and shims to secure the layout sections in place. Prior to installing the backdrop joiners, I applied candle wax along the edges of the backdrops. The backdrop joiners were then slid into place. This prevents them from getting stuck in place over time. When we disassembled the layout in July 2021, all of the backdrop joiners were easily removed after 11 years or more in place. This photograph shows the 2 sections for Chetwynd Yard permanently installed, bolted together, leveled, and secured. The new backdrop is now looking pretty good. I then installed the brackets for the upper deck. Note that these are now passing through slots in the new backdrop for Chetwynd below. The 2 sections for Dawson Creek were brought into the room and placed on their brackets. This is where the helping hands sure come in handy. Again, the 2 sections for Dawson Creek were bolted together and wedges and shims were used to get them level on the brackets. And here we see the 2 upper deck sections for Dawson Creek installed, bolted together, leveled, and secured. Note how the new backdrop for Chetwynd now extends up to meet the underside of the upper deck, which looks much better. And so here we have the sections for Chetwynd Yard and Dawson Creek installed, leveled, and secured. I'm still working on the lighting canopies above. If we come in closer to the joint between the 2 benchwork halves, we'll show you the carriage bolts, washers, and nuts that I used to secure the 2 sections together. And then you can see the block in there that is helping to level the sections, and also the screw that goes through the bracket to secure the sections to the bracket. So very happy that these sections are now up on the wall, and we will get the lighting canopy done, and then this entire wall will be ready for action. The sections for the helix, Cascatnaw, and its canopy were stored underneath Chetwynd Yard for now until the time comes to work on them. The sections for the Highway 97 overpass and the Pine River Bridge were set up on sawhorses for access around and underneath, as these are the next sections to be worked on. On the Highway 97 overpass section, most of the work involves extending the wiring for the Fort St. John subdivision out through the rear wall so that it can continue along the wall and into the next room for Septimus. Another major piece of work on this section will be rerouting of the track for the Fort St. John subdivision, which is seen on the left, through the opening in the rear backdrop. On the Pine River section, most of the work will be to repair and reconnect wiring underneath. The section of track between the east end of the bridge and the helix was damaged during the move, so I will have to remove that and replace it. The section for Sundance was also set up on sawhorses in the living room, so work on it can commence. This section has the Dawson Creek subdivision trackage passing through Sundance in front, and the Fort St. John subdivision trackage passing through Septimus at the rear. The former location of Septimus will be repurposed as bond siding. This section of benchwork will need to be shortened by approximately 20 inches to fit in its new location. This is because the new layout room is narrower than the old one. In the left photograph, I am pointing to the approximate location of the cut which will have to be made. Everything to the left of that will be discarded, so the track and road bed must be removed back to a point before the turnouts. The Dawson Creek subdivision trackage in front will have to be taken up entirely, as there is damage at the right end. I am hoping to move Sundance siding in a bit to eliminate the two S-curves and preserve some siding length, as well as gain a little more foreground for photography. For the Fort St. John subdivision at the rear, Septimus siding 2 will be removed along with its turnouts, and siding 1 will be repurposed as bond siding. All these trackage changes will require major revisions to the wiring and turnout control arrangements underneath, so there is a lot of work ahead of me here. Work has also begun on the Fort St. John extension along and through the north wall. These are the two sections for the run along the wall to the opening. The third section will carry the tracks through the wall opening. This will receive walls to prevent any derailments going down into the wall cavity and a roof to help keep dust off the tracks. All three sections for the extension are fitted with biscuit joints to help align them together. Before we go, I just wanted to say a few words about the upcoming work for March. This is the section for the Highway 97 overpass. And on this section, we're going to be relocating the Fort St. John subdivision, which used to finish here. We're going to reroute it through the backdrop and then along the wall and into the other room. That will require all of the wiring that was initially terminated here to be extended through the rear backdrop and then follow that track along. We're also going to be working on the Pine River section. This needs some repairs to the wiring underneath, and it also needs repairs to the track, which is at the end here. This is the track leading from the bridge to the helix, and it got damaged at that end during the move, and I'm going to have to replace this piece of track entirely to get that fixed. And just as the month came to a close here, I received the benchwork sections to run along the wall and into the next room. These have to be primed and painted, and then the track will have to be laid. So the track is going to come out of the backdrop of the Highway 97 section, and then it will run along this ledge, and then it will run through the wall. So you can see we've put a piece in the wall there to take the tracks through, and on the other side will be benchwork for the new Septimus. This is the section for Sundance, which is now set up in the living room for work. And there's a lot of work to do on this section. It has the Dawson Creek subdivision in front, which comes out of Chetwynd, passes through Sundance siding, and continues on towards the Highway 97 overpass and the Pine River Bridge. And then in the rear, it has the Fort St. John subdivision coming out of Chetwynd, passing through what was Septimus, and terminating at the end of the wall there. This section will have to be shortened by approximately 20 inches, and that's because the new layout room is narrower than the old layout room. So we're going to have to cut this section about here, and everything to the left will have to be discarded. That means the track will have to be taken up, and the Dawson Creek subdivision track will have to be taken up in its entirety because there is damage at this end, unfortunately. But I'm going to use that opportunity to try and move Sundance siding over a bit, and I'm going to try and take out these S-curves so that I can regain some of the siding length that I'm losing. And we'll try and do that at both ends. For the Fort St. John subdivision, this is now going to become bond siding, which is one of the two sidings between Chetwynd and Septimus, because we're moving Septimus to the other room. So I'm going to take out siding 2 completely, along with its turnouts, and siding 1 will become the new bond siding. This will also have to be shortened past the cut, and the turnouts will have to be moved in and then relaid. Once all of the track work has been revised, then of course we have to go underneath and do all of the work on the wiring and the turnout controls. So a lot of work to do on this section. It's going to keep me busy probably for the month of March. So we'll be getting to that very shortly, and we'll be back with a March update to show you where we're at. I would like to thank my friends Michael, Nolan, and John who helped with installation for the first layout sections. Their assistance is greatly appreciated. I hope that you've enjoyed this layout update. During March, I will be working on the next layout sections to be installed, so I hope to be back next month with another update. Until then, I invite you to like and subscribe to this channel, and also to visit my website at www.bcrdawsonsub.ca. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace be with you.